It's got to be one of the most frustrating things that can happen in your career. You've prepared for days, you know your stuff inside and out, but then the big question comes, and your mind just goes blank. Nothing. We call this the interview freeze, and it feels like a massive personal failure. But what if I told you it's actually a deep-seated neurological response, and that just by understanding what's going on in your brain, you can start to take back control? Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is hitting home for a lot of you. That sudden, stomach-dropping silence where you know a perfect answer should be. Look, you are not alone. This is an incredibly common reaction to a very specific and very intense kind of pressure. And it actually has a name. This isn't just choking or being nervous. It's a very specific physiological state called the freeze response. And just giving it a name, taking it out of the realm of personal failure and putting it into the world of biology is the first real step to managing it. So why does this happen in an interview of all places? Well, because an interview isn't just a friendly chat. It's what psychologists call a high-stakes social evaluation. And our brains, well, they are exquisitely tuned to the kind of threat that implies. I mean, just think about what's really going on in that room. You've got authority figures literally judging your every word, you're trying to guess what they really want to hear, and you're doing it all against the clock. Add in a clear power imbalance and the fact that your identity and your ability to pay your bills feel like they're on the line, and you can see, this isn't a conversation. It's the perfect storm for triggering a threat response. Okay, so all that pressure from the outside, it creates an absolutely intense reaction on the inside. I want you to think of your brain's processing power, its mental bandwidth, as a limited resource. The interview environment pushes that resource right to the edge, and sometimes right over it, leading to a total system collapse. Now, this collapse has a technical name, cognitive overload. And the keywords here are temporary disruption. This is so important. Your knowledge isn't gone. Your experience didn't just vanish. Access to it has just been temporarily cut off because your working memory, which is kind of like the RAM in your computer, has just crashed. And here's the way that crash happens. Your brain is performing this incredible cognitive juggling act. You're not just answering a question. At the exact same time, you're trying to decode what they're really asking, search your entire life's database for the perfect example, build a compelling story on the fly, and monitor your own body language, all while trying to predict how they're going to react. It's a massive amount of processing for any brain to handle. Honestly, the best analogy for this is a DDoS attack. That's a distributed denial of service attack. In the tech world, that's when hackers flood a server with so many junk requests that it gets overwhelmed and just shuts down for legitimate users. Well, the exact same thing is happening inside your head. Let's see how this happens. First, that fear of being judged hits your system. This isn't just a small thought. It's a powerful, resource-hungry process that starts eating up your mental bandwidth. Then comes the next wave, your own inner critic. Oh man, did I say that right? That last answer was so weak. I have to be perfect. Every single one of those thoughts is another bogus request hammering your system, demanding attention. And finally, you start spinning out about the future. If I don't get this job, what am I going to do? This anxiety is the third massive flood of requests, and it yanks your focus completely away from the one thing you're supposed to be doing, answering the question. So here's the bottom line. When your brain is busy processing fear, self-criticism, and anxiety, there is almost no bandwidth left over for the actual job of remembering a story and speaking clearly. Your system isn't broken, it's just completely, totally occupied. But here's the thing, this isn't just a cognitive event happening in your thoughts. It goes so much deeper than that. We're talking about a hardwired survival instinct, an ancient switch in our nervous system that has been keeping our species alive for millennia. See, when we perceive a threat, and a high-stakes interview definitely counts, our bodies default to one of 4 survival modes. You might get argumentative, which is fight. Or maybe you rush your answers just to get out of there, that's flight. Some people become super agreeable and just tell the interviewer whatever they want to hear, which is called fawn. But the one we're talking about today is when you just stop. You freeze. The biological term for this is pretty cool. It's called tonic immobility. Out in the wild, an animal freezing makes it less visible to a predator. It gives it a critical second to assess the situation. In an interview, that same ancient reflex shows up as a blank mind and a total loss for words. Your body is trying to keep you safe in a way that, ironically, feels profoundly unsafe. So this leads us to the central, most fascinating question of this whole thing. When your mind goes blank, is that a bug, a failure of your system, or is it a feature, a protective mechanism that's just completely misunderstood in our modern world. There are two really powerful ways to look at this. On one side, you've got the cognitive failure argument. This view says the freeze is basically a breakdown. Your brain's executive functions just collapse when you need them most. But on the other side, the adaptive protection view argues it's not a breakdown at all. It's a deliberate protective pause where your brain is actually reallocating resources to manage a perceived threat. The failure view is pretty simple, right? It sees the freeze as being fundamentally bad for you in a professional setting. The ability to communicate under pressure is a skill people value. And from this perspective, freezing is a clear failure to show that skill. But the adaptive view flips that completely on its head. It suggests your brain is actually making a really smart trade-off. It's choosing to sacrifice complex speech for a moment to focus all its energy on managing the intense emotional stress of the situation. It's a feature, not a bug. The problem is that the environment is misinterpreting the signal. So where does that leave us? Well, how you decide to interpret the freeze, as a personal failure or as an adaptive response, totally changes how you try to solve it. Let's look at the different solutions that come from each of these perspectives. Okay, so if you see it as a cognitive failure, the solution is all about strengthening your own system. This approach puts all the responsibility on you, the individual, to build up your resilience. It means using things like the STAR method to reduce that mental juggling act, practicing your answers out loud to carve those pathways in your brain, and actively training your nervous system to stay calmer under pressure. But if you see it as an adaptive feature, the responsibility shifts from the candidate to the system itself. The goal here isn't to fix the person, but to fix the environment that's triggering the threat response. That means making interviews less like an interrogation and actually training interviewers to understand that a pause doesn't mean someone is incompetent. It means they're human. But of course, it's not really an either-or situation, is it? A real, complete solution needs both. Yes, we as individuals can and should prepare better to manage our cognitive load. But organizations also have a responsibility to create systems that don't unfairly punish people for having totally normal human stress responses. And that really leaves us with this final critical question to think about. What are we actually testing in an interview? Are we trying to find out if a person can truly do the job? Or are we just testing their ability to perform under a very specific, very artificial, and incredibly intense kind of psychological pressure? The answer to that question? Well, it really changes everything.